Welcome everyone to the second part of how to use percents in some basic percent word problems. In the first part, I explained how to solve these problems using proportions. And so now I'm going to explain how to solve these percent problems by writing and solving an equation. So let's get started. So these problems are just like the other ones. They look identical. The only thing that you're going to need to know is that you're going to use a different process if you choose to. This would be the algebraic way of figuring out the percent. When you have proportions, it looks like algebra. There's a variable involved, but a lot of people don't actually use the algebra, although I did do them algebraically correctly in my explanation. So in all these problems, you're going to have an unknown, and you're going to just tell what the unknown stands for. If it's a number, you write let x or whatever letter you decide to use equal a number. If it's a percent, you say let p or whatever the variable is that you decide to use equal the percent. Okay? Then you're going to translate the sentence or the question word by word to write an equation. And when you do that, you need to remember two things. First of all, a percent is not a number, so you have to change the percent into a number, and you can certainly change it into a fraction if you decide to. Most people change them into decimals. Okay? The second thing you need to remember, so that's the first thing. The second thing you need to remember is that these two words, of and is, have specific meanings all the time in math. So you would translate them in the exact same way that you normally do, which means if you see the word of, you put a multiplication sign. If you see the word is, you put an equal sign. And then finally, the third thing you have to do is actually solve the equation. And since you're using algebra, it would make sense to use inverse operations. So let's get started with our first example. So it says, what is 47% of 54? So the thing that we don't know is the what. And the what is some kind of a number. So we're going to say let x equal the number, because we're going to end up with a number for our answer. Okay, so that's the first thing. The second thing that we need to remember is that this percent needs to change into a decimal or a fraction. So we need to remember that 47% means the same thing as 0.47 or just 0.47. Okay? And then finally, if you remember from a couple of seconds ago, is multiplication. Is an equal sign, and of is multiplication. So now we can just very easily write our equation to go with this using the different things that we've replaced with different symbols. So what is x? Is means equals. 47% is 0.47. Of means multiply. And 54 is already a number, so we don't need to do anything with that. Let me just make my decimal point just a little bit bigger. Okay, so in this problem, it says multiply 0.47 times 54, so you would have to work that out. I'm not going to do that on here because I don't have enough room, but the answer to 0.47 times 54 happens to be 25.38. So the answer to the question, what is 47% of 54? The answer is 25.38. Does that make sense? 47% is about 50%. 54 is about 50. 50% is half of something. Half of 50 is 25. So we're pretty close to the right answer. Actually, we're exactly on the right answer. Okay, so your answer makes sense. All right, next kind of example. Same situation. So first thing we need to do is find the thing that we're looking for, the unknown. So it asks for what number. So I'm going to use an n this time. Let n equal what number? You could just put the number symbol there, but I underlined what number, so I'm going to put what number. Okay? So then, of course, we have to remember that we need to change 84% into a decimal. So you don't have to do this separately. I'm just writing it out separately so you can see where it is. So we'll move the decimal point 2 places to the left from where it is in the problem. So that means we're going to get 0.84. And lastly, we need to look at the words in the problem. So we have of, which stands for our multiplication sign, and is, which stands for equals. So now we're just going to put all of it together in one equation. So 84% comes first, so we're going to write 0.84 or 0.84, whatever you decide you want to use. Of means multiply. What number is n? Is equals. 260 is already a number. So I just went number for number, word for word, thing for thing down the line and replaced what it said with what it means in math. That's all I did. Okay, so now we can't multiply because we don't know what we don't know what n is. So we can't find out what 0.84 times n is. So now we have to start using our inverse operations. So since we can't multiply by 0.84, we're going to use the inverse of that, which is dividing by 0.84. We're going to do that on both sides. And of course we use fraction notation because this is an algebra problem. Okay, and so these, we undid that, so it goes away. So I'm left with n on the left. And if you actually work out 260 divided by 0.84, the result is a very long decimal. And so we're just going to take it to the hundredths place. So we're going to get approximately 309.52 if we round to the hundredths place. 309.52. Okay, so 309.52. So let's see if that makes sense. 84% of 309.52 is 260. So 84% isn't quite 100%, but it's definitely more than half. So if the number is 309, that's close to 300. Half of 300 would be 150. The whole thing would be 300. And 260 is somewhere in the middle there, so that would make sense that our answer is something close to 300 itself. I'm sorry, I'm trying to fix this decimal point because it looked bad. It's not helping. Okay, moving on to the next example. What percent of 260 is 84? So this time, the thing that we're translating, or that we're defining at the beginning, is the percent. So we're going to say let P equal what percent? Or you could just write percent, and I'm going to use a percent sign. Okay. We don't have a percent that we need to change this time, so now really all we have to focus on are our two words here. Of means multiplication again, is means an equal sign again. So now we're going to write our equation. So we're just going to translate. So what percent we defined as P, so we're going to write P. Of means multiply. 260 is already a number. Is means equals. And 84 is already a number. Wasn't as much to translate. Okay, so this says we're supposed to multiply P times 260, but we don't know what P is. So we have to undo the multiplying by 260. So we're going to undo that by dividing on both sides by 260. Divide by 260 on both sides. And so then P equals the number 0.3207. Sorry, that's not right. It equals 0.32307. And it goes on for a really long time. I'll just put one more that fits, so 6. Whoa, that looks bad too. Okay, so 3076. Okay. So now it says that we're supposed to have a percent, but that doesn't look like a percent to me. So now we have to do one more step in this problem and change this into a percent, because P is supposed to be 1. So if we're going to change it into a percent, we have to move the decimal point 2 places to the right. And so P equals approximately 32 point, if I round to the nearest hundredth, 31%. Okay, so let's just look at this. Let's see if our answer makes sense. So 32.31% is approximately 1/3, because that would be 33 1/3%. So let's look at these numbers. 1/3 of 260 is close to 1/3 of 240, which is 80, because 240 divided by 3 is 80. And 84 is pretty close to 80, so our answer makes sense. So that's how you use equations to solve percent problems. Now, one last little tidbit of information. If you don't write the equation and you try to take the lazy way out and you say, okay, well, I'm always going to divide, or I'm always going to multiply, or in this case, I'm going to multiply, or in this case, I'm going to divide, then you have to remember what those cases are. If you go back to this whole thing and you always write an equation, then when you look at your equations, you're going to know, do I have to solve the equation using multiplication, or do I have to solve the equation using division? It's always going to be one of those two things. The way the equation is set up makes the difference as to what operation that you actually do. Good luck with this if you decide to use equations to solve percent problems.